under the most draft pressure?
Cincinnati Bengals.
Great answer.
Look, you talk about a team, an organization that feels like, at least coming out of there, and a lot of talking heads, we talk about them glowingly because of the quarterback and that offense as a Super Bowl contending team because of who they have at quarterback. Well, in free agency, prior to free agency, Joe Burrow's like, free agency is of paramount importance.
Yeah.
And what do? Lose a lot of guys.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he meant.
Lose a lot of guys and like 2-for-1s. I know they signed a pass rush. I know they signed a couple other a safety. But you didn't fill the voids to where now you're at the draft and you have all these needs. And if you're the Bengals, forget the needs. You have to get it right. You just have to select a good player that is going to impact your team, preferably on the defensive side of the ball.
Does it have to be on the defensive side?
It has to.
If it's not on the defensive side, then it probably better be on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you lost your swing line center, Lucas Patrick, who was a center guard, and then you just cut Matt Lee, I think last week, who was center guard. So, you lose interior linemen, you need linemen. Obviously, you want to protect your greatest asset if you're going to go on the offensive side of the ball. That's Joe Burrow.
Yep.
But we know you have so many glaring needs defensively. If I'm a Bengals fan, I don't care who you pick. Just make sure you get the pick right. Because if you get the pick right, they're going to be like, man, he's a heck of a player. But if you go for need and you get that wrong, it's like what they've been doing over and over again every year.
I like your answer, but I'm going to one-up you.
Oh, wow.
And go Bengals South.
No. All right, I want to remain focused on the Bengals because I believe they represent a different situation for each franchise, so I'll just break down each team individually, because otherwise the discussion becomes completely chaotic. Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious that the Cincinnati Bengals are carrying the heaviest burden of expectations. I believe it's probably fair to state that the Bengals have let down their quarterback more than any other organization in the league, if we're being honest with ourselves. I don't even think that qualifies as a particularly hot take or anything controversial. If we're examining all the teams that even have remotely competent quarterback play, the Bengals are simply at the rock bottom when it comes to providing support. And I just made this point in an earlier video. I can't recall which one it was. I think it was a Mendoza video because people were trying to draw comparisons between Mendoza and Joe Burrow, and it's just ridiculous. Joe Burrow in 2024 threw for a 70% completion rate, 4,918 yards, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and posted a 108.5 passer rating. And he did it all while playing behind the worst defensive line in the entire NFL. And clearly the shortest time to throw in the league. And he absolutely dominated. And he still didn't even make the playoffs. Let me repeat that, he did not even reach the postseason. And T. Higgins didn't play a full season either. He missed something like 3 or 4 games. So yes, he had Ja'Marr Chase, a bottom-tier rushing attack, and the defense was obviously a complete disaster. It's just unbelievable. And yet people still want to pin the blame on Joe Burrow for that. They say things like, well, he wasn't good enough, or look at what he did against Miami. And honestly, I'm just exhausted by those kinds of takes because they are pure nonsense. I've mentioned this many times before, but I haven't really had a chance to say it much recently because the Cincinnati Bengals have been so completely irrelevant. That's simply the truth. They have genuinely become irrelevant, which is absolutely insane when you have Joe Burrow as your quarterback. And if the Bengals were actually a well-managed organization, Joe Burrow could be on a trajectory to enter the greatest of all-time conversation. That is the reality. Now, again, Joe Burrow has also dealt with injuries, and that has unquestionably been a problem, frustrating and unfortunate. I'm not minimizing that or pretending it didn't happen. That's just how things go sometimes. But the Bengals have simply not done enough to support and build competitive rosters around Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow could easily have multiple Super Bowl victories if he played for the San Francisco 49ers. I just used the 49ers as an example. I mean, honestly, to think that Joe Burrow isn't worth at least 3 more points per game than Brock Purdy? Really? Come on. Come on. If he had played for the Rams, if he had played for The 49ers, the Eagles, the Chiefs, of course he'd be right there in the mix. We can add the Broncos to that list now. Add the Broncos. Add the Patriots. Just add all those teams to the list. And it's so crazy how you can end up in a position where, if you just land with the right franchise, if your organization simply does right by you, you could be set up to win multiple Super Bowls and enter the GOAT discussion. And it's just, if Joe Burrow had been drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, he'd be living Patrick Mahomes' life. He would be doing exactly what Mahomes does, and Patrick Mahomes would be living Joe Burrow's life if he had gone to the Bengals. And that is just crazy to me. It really is. It's such a roll of the dice. And I just think Bengals fans have to be able to hold their organization accountable, in a certain way. In the same way you see Eagles fans hold the Eagles accountable. And because of that, that franchise is relentlessly pushing to constantly win. And I just don't see that from a team like the Bengals. And then you ask yourself, what do you do from here? And it's so tragic because we have been robbed of such incredible moments with Joe Burrow. Because he is special. Even in a game that ended in a loss, like the Rams versus the Seahawks game with Matthew Stafford. The fact that he's in Los Angeles and now he's in that position in the NFC Championship game. That game was incredible. That game was awesome. That game actually mattered. And that game felt, in many ways, like an evenly matched contest because of how the defenses were operating and the offensive coaching on both sides. You could see that it was a true battle. Even in the actual Bengals battles, specifically against the Kansas City Chiefs, you know who Andy Reid and Spags are. And it's the construction of the team, whether it's defense, offense, whatever it may be, you see that elevation. The Kansas City Chiefs have consistently elevated themselves in the playoffs just from a coaching perspective alone, let alone the players, everyone beyond Patrick Mahomes. Obviously Mahomes elevates, but even watching everyone else rise to the occasion in a way that we simply have not seen with the Bengals. And it's such a tragedy to me because we should be seeing the Bengals in, again, the fact that in 2024 they couldn't put together a competent team. You have that season from Joe Burrow. I mean, that is just a perfect example of what are we even doing here. How could our quarterback literally post better numbers than Tom Brady in his undefeated season, and we don't even make the playoffs? I mean, that's just bonkers. It's absolutely insane. And the crazy thing is that people think so little of the Bengals that no one is really even talking about them. When you think about it, we talk about the pressure being on the Eagles. Nick Sirianni could be fired. Jalen Hurts could be traded. And yet they've been to 2 Super Bowls in the last few years and won one of them. They dominated the Kansas City Chiefs. Right? And yet here we are. They have more pressure to perform and to compete, and they are discussed more than the Cincinnati Bengals. The Dallas Cowboys have been discussed more, and not just because of their popularity, but simply because there seems to be a higher standard there. The Bills, the Ravens, again, the Broncos. The Jaguars. The Jaguars have been discussed more in terms of, oh, what can Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence do in year 2 together? The Chicago Bears with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. And yet you have Joe Burrow as your quarterback. A truly elite quarterback. And Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, blah blah blah. And yet no one is firmly saying, well, I know the Bengals are bouncing back. The Bengals are clearly going to be an elite top team next season. Of course the Bengals have to be considered when we're talking about Super Bowl contenders. But no one is really having that conversation. And even I, when we were talking earlier, I forget exactly when, probably a handful of videos this offseason discussing various teams. I think maybe we were looking at the schedule and who else is a contender, like when I'm making a Broncos video and I'm thinking, okay, what are the teams you're probably going to have to go through or compete against to get back to the AFC Championship game, etc., etc. Every time I come to the Bengals, I always think, who could possibly have any kind of prediction about the Bengals? Right? I mean seriously, who could feel any degree of confidence about who and what the Bengals will be? And it's just crazy. It really is. And like I said earlier, it is a genuine tragedy because as fans, we are being robbed. We are being robbed of entertainment. We are being robbed of witnessing greatness. We are being robbed of watching epic moments in the playoffs. Incredible back and forth battles. And it's just, what? Come on. Even in losses. Even in losses. It doesn't have to be just wins, but even in losses. I've seen Josh Allen be great and look like Superman even when he lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. Right? I've seen Jalen Hurts literally be Superman in the Super Bowl as well. And I'm not necessarily putting them in the exact same category, but even in the loss in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, right? That was still greatness. That Super Bowl was epic. At the time, people were saying, this is one of the craziest Super Bowls we've ever seen. And that was for good reason. It was epic. I think it was one of the highest scoring Super Bowls ever. The Eagles lost while scoring the most points in Super Bowl history or something like that. Jalen Hurts breaking records. So even in losses, we are still entertained. It's still greatness. And we are simply being robbed of that. We are being robbed of that. And as a fan, I think that's a huge disappointment. A major, major disappointment. So the Bengals should be under tremendous pressure, but that pressure has to come from some. Where? The media isn't putting pressure on them. The fans, where is that? Again, I use Philadelphia as the example because they are talked about so much. And it's simple, if you don't win, heads roll. You're out. And everyone knows that. Everyone feels it. Everyone senses it. The year they won the Super Bowl, there was talk like, oh my gosh, Jalen Hurts is going to be benched. Nick Sirianni is going to be fired. There was all this energy behind it. For a team that had gone to the Super Bowl the year prior. And then they win the Super Bowl, and just by virtue of them not repeating, it's like, we need some answers. Someone has to answer for this. The Bengals? It's just, eh. And it's like, wait, what? So, I'd love to know how Bengals fans feel watching how everything unfolds for them. I mean, I don't know. Because when you look at the other teams, and I haven't watched the clips, but when I was setting this up I could see they bring up the Cowboys. I see the Chiefs. I assume Nick is talking about the Chiefs. Yeah, of course. And it makes sense because those teams are held to a standard. And again, the Cowboys have fallen short year after year after year. I'm not denying that. But they are at least held to a standard. They are at least making changes. And say what you will about Jerry Jones, he does make moves. They may not be the best moves that you love, but they are still moves. He is still trying. He fires coaches, right? He hires, what? Dak has now had 3 different D coaches. All these different defensive coordinators and so on. So it is something. And I do think the Chiefs are under more pressure, that's why I'm going to make another video talking about the Chiefs. I do think the Chiefs are under more pressure than the Bengals, and under the most pressure overall, because of what's at stake. Because the Chiefs can actually win a Super Bowl. And this is the last heart of Patrick Mahomes' prime, these next 3 years. So this might be the best draft selection order that you will have for the rest of Mahomes' career. So you better take advantage of it. Go after it. And yet again with the Bengals, think about the conversations we have even in the media, where it's kind of like, will Josh Allen win a Super Bowl? Will Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl? Those are the discussions happening. And we don't even bring up Joe Burrow and the Bengals anymore. At all. During the offseason, it was always, oh, what are the Bills going to do? And they go out and get DJ Moore. What are the Ravens going to do? Oh, maybe they trade for Max Crosby. We know they get Trey Hendrickson. Yeah, right? It's like, Lamar Jackson and his new coach, what's that going to look like? And Josh Allen and his new coach, what's that going to look like? There's all this energy. Again, even the Chiefs, that energy, Bieniemy, etc. The Broncos, Jalen Waddle. It's all this energy of, okay, what are you going to do to take the next step forward? What are you going to do Oh, be more resilient? The conversations are real, loud, and prominent. And they are essentially non-existent for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't even feel pressure to try to find the Bengals. If I don't make a Bills video or Ravens video, you know, any of the main teams, I think, I need to look a little harder to find some of these videos because I have to make a Bills video, right? I have to cover that team. I have to talk about them. I have to figure out what they've been up to, etc. I feel zero pressure with the Bengals. Because it genuinely feels like it doesn't matter. They are not part of the conversation. They are not part of the global football conversation at large. And again, that's insane. That's insane. And I don't want to hear, well, it's Cincinnati. And of course Dallas has the largest fan base. I get it. I do. But the Bills don't have the most massive fan base out there. The Jaguars certainly don't. And yet the Jaguars, in a weird enough way, feel more important to the global conversation of the sports world than the Cincinnati Bengals. I feel more pressure to talk about the Tennessee Titans and Cam Ward and Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll and what that's going to look like. The Raiders, the moves they are making. I feel that pressure. By pressure, I mean positive pressure. Not negative. I mean there is motivation to talk about these things. There's a lot of energy behind it. And if I don't talk about it, I feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job of having the right conversations and bringing the right talking points. And it also feels like I'm being left behind because everyone else is having the conversation and I'm not. That's what I mean by pressure. And I feel none of that with the Cincinnati Bengals. None of that. No one says, oh, why aren't you talking about Joe Burrow and the Bengals? Because the answer is, it doesn't really matter. And we have all these other conversations, Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy with the 49ers, Jalen Hurts with the Eagles. How do we figure out who these quarterbacks are? Who's better? Who's worse? Who's benefiting from coaching? Who's not? All of this is in the conversation. No conversation about Joe Burrow whatsoever. It's just not part of the discussion. That is an epic failure. An epic failure. Epic failure. And again, I want to emphasize before I finish, Joe Burrow does contribute to that with some of his injuries. I don't mean contribute as in it's within his control, but yes, the injuries are part of that story. But to me, they are about 30% of it. And the rest is the Bengals, 70%. And I don't blame Joe Burrow for anything. Don't point out to anyone who says, well, he wasn't good enough in this game. Well, he wasn't good enough in that game. I don't want to hear it. No one is flawless. No one is perfect every single game and every single moment. Not Mahomes. Not Josh Allen, not Lamar. Patrick Mahomes has not been great from start to finish in many games and has won Super Bowls in those games, okay? So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So, I don't know. It's really bizarre to me. At the bare minimum, the Bengals should have as much momentum and as much staying power in the conversation as at least the Bills or the Ravens, or at the very least the Pittsburgh Steelers with, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers we know is a lightning rod. But any of those quarterbacks have had more momentum, energy, and staying power in terms of when the conversation gets brought up, it lingers, and everyone is talking about it, and in the comment section you're revisiting a comment from a week ago just because you really want to reply to it. Russell Wilson had more energy than Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. That cannot be. That cannot be. It makes no sense whatsoever. J.J. McCarthy with the Minnesota Vikings was a bigger talking point than Joe Burrow. It just doesn't, it makes no sense. And Joe Burrow is so elite. Joe Burrow is such an insanely gifted quarterback. He is so gifted, so special, so elite. And yet we cannot even cultivate an environment where that can truly flourish and thrive and, at the bare minimum, at least be a regular talking point in the NFL ecosystem. That's how you know things are messed up. That's how you know that when Justin Fields with the Pittsburgh Steelers generates more of a conversation, more of a sense of momentum and ability to win games and even go on a playoff run, than a Joe Burrow-led football team, even with Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, two great receivers to work with, it is simply a failure of epic proportions. If, and I'm definitely going to end here, if Greg didn't even mention the Bengals, nobody was probably even thinking about the Bengals. And ironically, I was thinking about the Bengals in an earlier segment. That's why I knew I wanted to jump on this, because they were talking about where you would like to see Jeremiah Love go, and you could see the Bengals. I think the Bengals are right after the Kansas City Chiefs or something. And I was just thinking, what about the Bengals with Jeremiah Love? That's interesting, but it's like, no one feels that the Bengals are making any swings or doing anything big or going to be aggressive or this or that. No one has that sense at all. Zero. None. It's not a discussion. No one says, oh, they should get Jeremiah Love to really boost this offense. Then who is stopping Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jeremiah Love, Jamar Chase? No one is having that conversation. Because they are not part of the conversation. And that is the problem. Those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you all think about the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you think they are under the most draft pressure? How do you feel about it? Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some debates. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you as part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we are really excited to be part of. I think we are well on our way to doing that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it really does help with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.